back up to verse 1. Chapter 17 has to do with Babylon and the doom of Babylon here. And remember, Babylon has two aspects to it. One is the religious aspect, and the other is the political and economic aspect. So chapter 17 has to do with the religious aspect of Babylon, and we call it Babylon because it traces its origin all the way back to Babylon, where there was the Tower of Babel, and Nimrod and his wife Semiramis, and they are the ones who organized the first great false religion. And so all these false religions, which they worship many gods. Most of the false religions of the world are takeoffs from this original false religion, and so that's why it refers to it as Babylon. Okay, so we'll begin reading at verse 1. It says, "And one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and spoke with me, saying, Come here, and I will show you the judgment of the great harlot, who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed acts of immorality, and those who dwell on the earth were made drunk with the wine of her immorality. And he carried me away in the spirit to a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was clothed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a gold cup full of abominations and of the unclean things of her immorality. And upon her forehead was a name was written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered greatly. And the angel said to me, Why do you wonder? I shall tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. The beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to come up out of the abyss, or the bottomless pit, and to go to destruction. And those who dwell on the earth will wonder, whose name has not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast that he was and is not and will come. Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits, and they are 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must remain a little while. And the beast which was and is not is himself also an 8th, and is one of the 7, and he goes to destruction. And the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. These have one purpose, and they give their power and authority to the beast. Okay, this chapter we have a lot of symbolism, but the symbolism is almost all of it is explained, and it's pretty straightforward. One thing about the book of Revelation and the symbolism is that the symbolism is almost obvious when when you stop and consider what is being said about it, and consider the symbolism is pretty much consistent throughout the Bible. And so if it's using symbolism in the passage that you're studying and you don't quite get it, well, you can go to other passages of the Bible and see how that same symbol is used, and usually it's used in the same way, because the symbolism is usually used in a way that kind of makes sense. Okay, so we start out talking about Babylon, and Babylon here is portrayed as a woman, and this is talking about the religious aspect of Babylon. Now, false religions are considered to be unfaithfulness to God. And it would be similar to unfaithfulness in a marriage relationship. So anyone engaged in false religion, worshiping a false god, is being unfaithful to God. In the same way that in a marriage relationship, a person would be unfaithful to his husband or wife. Okay, so this is why there's so much language in here about immorality and the harlot and so forth, is because this false religion is spiritual immorality. But there's also another reason, is because the false religion of Babylon also incorporated sex into its worship, because the principal goddess was the goddess of fertility, and the worship of the goddess involved sexual intercourse with the temple priestesses. Now, the priestess was a representative of the goddess, and these goddesses of fertility were very lustful, sexually lustful, and they were satisfied by sex. And so when a person had sex with the priestess, it was like having sex with a goddess, and then the goddess would bless the person by giving his herds and his flocks fertility, or his crops, or his business, or whatever, make it successful. And so that's the way they conceived of, that's the way they thought about God, their goddesses. And so in two ways then it brought the sexual immorality into the false religion. And these goddesses of fertility were also the goddesses of war. And so as the king then, when he honored the goddesses, they would give him his army's victory on the battlefield. Okay, so you recall several names down through history. You had, well, in Babylon, you had Ishtar, from which we get the word Easter. There was also Sybil, and in Rome it was Venus, and Greece it was Diane, and Asia Minor it was Artemis. Egypt, I think it was Isis, and in Canaan it was Ashtaroth, and so it was the same basic idea, but they just had different names in different places. Okay, so then when it says that the kings of the earth, let's see in verse 1 says that the angel says, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed acts of immorality. Okay, so the kings would depend on these goddesses to give them victory over their enemies. It says, and those who dwell on the earth were made drunk with the wine of their immorality. And we've seen in Romans chapter 1 how when people got away from God, that God gave them up to depraved minds, and they just could not think rationally anymore. For example, it says that when people get away from God, they went into homosexuality, indecent acts, and they didn't see fit to acknowledge God any longer. God gave them over to depraved minds. Okay, so continual involvement, sexual deviancy, and this thing affects your mind and it leads you into all kind of unrighteousness and wickedness. It leads you away from God, because God gave them over to impurity, and gave them over to degrading passions. And so the morality just affects your ability to think straight. And so that's why it's talking about they have been made drunk with the wine of immorality, because like a drunkard under the influence of alcohol can't think straight. So people who are involved in immorality and stuff, eventually it affects their minds to where they just can't think anymore, and they kind of get obsessed with or addicted. Okay, so all these false, the religion, the Babylonian religion, has gotten people away from God and led them into immorality and perverseness and so forth. Also lead them into cruelty, because they persecuted the true believers. Okay, so the symbolism there is a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, there in verse 3. And the beast was full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Okay, so the beast then is, and the woman, see, the woman represents Babylon, the religious aspect, and the beast represents Babylon in the political, economic aspect of it. Okay, so the beast, then we would also identify that with the Antichrist. So the beast then represents the kingdom of the Antichrist, and also the Antichrist himself. And so when it's referring to this beast, we just have to see what it's saying about the beast to figure out whether it's talking about the kingdom or whether it's talking about the king, who is the Antichrist. Okay, so beginning, then it says the beast was full of blasphemous names. Okay, well that would be true primarily the Antichrist himself. Remember in our study back in Daniel that the Antichrist is doing great boasting and blaspheming God. And so then it goes on to describe the beast that he had 7 heads. And we've already identified the heads as being the historical empires which Satan used to persecute the Jews. And those began with Egypt, where Israel was in bondage and slavery. They tried to annihilate the Jews by having all the boy babies thrown into the river. Well, that didn't work. the children of Israel continued to increase, and when they finally came out of the Exodus, they numbered probably around 2 million, maybe more. They went in when Joseph, remember Joseph was sold into slavery, and then later on he brought his whole family down there because of the famine, and they started out with just 70 people, the extended family. Jacob, his 12 sons and their wives and their children were 70 altogether when they went down into Egypt. And then something like 300 years later, they had multiplied to over 2 million. Now, included in that 2 million were a lot of Egyptians. There were many Egyptians, when they saw the plagues and everything, were converted to the worship of the true God, and they came out with the Israelites because they wanted to follow God. And so it was a mixed company that came out. Mostly, of course, they were Israelites, and they were just sort of absorbed into the Israelites. And many others down through history have sort of converted to Judaism and sort of merged in. So the Israelites did not exclusively the descendants of Jacob. They have a lot of others were brought in, and they were accepted when they showed true faith in God, like Ruth was a Moabitess, and several other ones. Now Ruth was, I think, grandmother or great-grandmother of David, so Ruth was a Moabitess and so forth. So that the bloodline contains a lot of Gentile blood. So, but anyway, let's see. So the beast then has the 7 heads. The first one was Egypt, and then they went for quite a while without having any major outside enemy, because whenever Israel would get away from God, God would raise up some country to chastise them, and they would repent and return to God. Like God frequently used the Philistines, or the Syrians, or the Moabites, or the Midianites. Whenever they got away from God, God would bring in a strong country near them, and they would be disciplined, and then they would repent and come back to God. But after Solomon, which was somewhere around, when Solomon died around 900 or so, then the nation was divided to the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah, and then Israel got away from God fairly rapidly. And so Assyria was constantly used to chastise them, but finally their iniquity got so bad that in 722 BC, the Assyrians took the northern kingdom of Israel, which was 10 tribes, took them into captivity. And they never did return as a group, although individually there were many Israelites who did migrate back to Israel. So there's no such thing as the lost tribes of Israel. That's kind of like a fiction. They're not really lost, even if we don't know where they are. God knows where they are, and someday He's going to bring them all back. In the Revelation, we're told that there were 12,000 seals from each tribe. Well, God knows where they are, and God can bring them back. So we talk about the lost tribes of Israel, but they're not really lost. God knows where they are. But for the most part, the Israelites themselves don't know what tribe they are from, because their genealogies that have not been kept up. Their genealogies were lost permanently when the Romans scattered them in 70 A.D. when the Romans destroyed Jerusalem. All the genealogies were lost. Okay, so the seven heads then represent Egypt, then Assyria, and then from then on it's the same ones we've seen in Daniel, with Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. Okay, so Rome was the sixth. Okay, so the beast then had 7 heads, and so there's the Rome of history was the 6th head, and that Rome has declined. Gibbon talks about, he wrote The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. Well, that empire declined and kind of went into obscurity, but it was never conquered and replaced by another kingdom. So in reality, it's still kind of under the surface, but it's still there. All of Europe is carrying the legacy of the Roman Empire, and according to prophecy, that Roman Empire is going to come back, but that's going to be the 7th head. So we call that the revived Roman Empire, and as we see what's happening in Europe today with the European Union and their attempts, so far they've got common currency now, they're trying to get common laws, they're trying to eliminate the borders so that there's no tariffs between them, and they've got free trade. So they're trying to get it more like the United States, where we have 50 states, but it's one nation, and so I think they're kind of aiming to have something like that, the United States of Europe. And so this may be what the revived Roman Empire will be. We just don't know for sure. We don't know what it will be called. Maybe called the United States of Europe, or it might be called something else. But anyway, that will be the 7th one. And the head of that country will be the Antichrist. The Antichrist will rise to power within the revived Roman Empire. Okay, so that will be the 7th. And then when the Antichrist achieves dominance, he's just going to take possession of it so that it will be his kingdom. And so that is what the beast itself represents. The scarlet-covered beast is Antichrist's kingdom, which has the legacy of all the 7 previous kingdoms, because it's all controlled by Satan, and Satan's strategies are pretty much the same. He wants to eliminate the nation of Israel. He tried to keep Christ from being born. He tried to even to destroy Christ. Remember, Herod had all the children killed around Bethlehem, and when Christ was crucified, they thought that they had succeeded in eliminating Christ, but unfortunately for Satan, Christ rose from the dead. And so Satan failed to eliminate Christ. So the next best thing is Satan's going to attempt to eliminate Israel itself, since God's program, Israel is a major part of that. Okay. Okay, so the beast then with the 7 heads, and then there are 10 horns to this beast. Now the horns are also future when the Antichrist comes to power. He will have his empire. You know, the emperor rules over nations and kingdoms. So the emperor will have these 10 kings under him, just like the emperor of Rome ruled over many kingdoms in the Roman Empire. And each of the kingdoms had a king. Like Herod was the king of Israel during the time of Christ, and there were other kings at the time, but they were all vassals or subordinate to the emperor. Okay, so the Antichrist will be the emperor, and he will have 10 kings under him of these 10 nations. Okay, so there's a little bit of let's say, uncertainty here as to just how extensive these 10 kingdoms are. Do they simply encompass the extent of the Roman Empire when it existed before, or does it go over the whole world? There's a difference of opinion, but it doesn't really say, so we can't really say for certain whether these 10 kings rule over the whole world or just over the western part of the world, such as Europe and perhaps even including the Western Hemisphere, because since North and South America and Central America were colonized mostly by Europeans, would they be considered part of the revived Roman Empire? So these are just certain questions that we just can't answer specifically because we don't have enough information. Okay, but anyway, the Antichrist then will have these 10 kings under him. So these 10 kings have not yet come to power, and they will be in power only during the time that the Antichrist is in power. Okay, then it gives us in verse 4 the description of woman. The woman was clothed with purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having on her head a gold cup full of abominations and unclean things of her immorality. Okay, this description of the purple and scarlet describes religious robes, most like the clergy of religions. Many of them dress in purple and scarlet robes, and so this is what this symbolizes: the woman in the Babylon in the religious aspect. So the purple and scarlet indicate the religious aspect of the clergy of the false religion. And of course their robes are all embroidered with gold and have jewels sewn into them and pearls and so forth. So whenever they have their high festivities or their high feasts or whatever, they're all dressed out in their robes and so forth. What this is picturing. But she has a gold cup full of abominations and of the unclean things of her immorality. Okay, and her name on her forehead was written, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth. So the mother would be the source. So all of the religious false religions and so forth can be traced back to the source in Babel, which was Nimrod and Semiramis. Okay, and then verse 6, I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. Okay, now these false religions have consistently persecuted the true believers down through history, whether it was in the Old Testament, it was the Jews, or now would be the Christians. Okay, so they are drunk with the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. Okay, and when I saw her, I wondered greatly. So the angel said to me, "Why do you wonder? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns." Okay, so now you're going to start talking about the beast. Verse 8, "The beast that you saw was and is not and is about to come up out of the abyss," which is the bottomless pit, "and to go to destruction," or perdition. Perdition means eternal destruction, or like ruin, eternal ruin. Talk about